I was enjoying my morning coffee when I noticed something strange out by my barn. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Rows of white folding chairs, floral arches, and a long buffet table lined the outside of the barn. A wedding? On my property? I squinted, stepping onto my porch for a better look. That's when I saw the catering staff setting up trays of food. A group of people arranged centerpieces while a DJ tested his equipment inside my barn. The barn I owned. The barn no one had asked to use. I set my mug down slowly, a cold wave of irritation washing over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an invasion. I wasn't part of the HOA that governed the neighborhood nearby, yet somehow I always found myself dealing with their nonsense. And today? Today was a new low. See, I live on a few acres of land just outside of the HOA's reach. My property isn't subject to their ridiculous rules, which makes me a frequent target of their self-important president, Karen. She's the kind of person who treats the HOA as her personal empire, complete with fines, complaints, and her uncanny ability to strong-arm people into doing whatever she wants. But this, a full wedding setup? This was a different level of entitlement. Curious and more than a little annoyed, I grabbed my hat and started walking toward the barn. As I got closer, I overheard bits of conversation. "The rustic aesthetic is just perfect," someone gushed. "The bride is going to love it. We have to be extra careful with the cake," I heard another voice say. "The couple spent a fortune on it." I stopped in my tracks. The realization hit me. The bride didn't know. My stomach sank. This wasn't just Karen throwing a community gathering. This was an actual wedding. And from the sound of it, the couple had no idea that their venue wasn't legitimate. Just as I reached the barn doors, a woman with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset intercepted me. She had that frazzled, overworked look of someone who'd been managing too many people all morning. "Excuse me, sir," she said, barely glancing up from her checklist. "This area is for staff only until after the ceremony." I crossed my arms. That's interesting, considering this is my barn. That got her attention. She blinked at me, confusion spreading across her face. I don't understand. "I own this property," I said, gesturing around me. "No one asked me for permission to use my barn." Her eyes widened in horror. "Wait, you're the owner?" "I was told this venue was reserved months ago." "By who?" I asked. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear her say it. "The woman from the HOA. Karen, something," she said quickly, flipping through her papers. "She handled all the arrangements." "Oh, of course she did." I took a slow, deep breath. I'd dealt with Karen's overreach before, but this was actual fraud. And right as I was deciding whether to start flipping tables or call the cops, I heard another voice. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" I turned to see a young couple stepping out of a car. The bride was clutching a garment bag, her expression bright and expectant. The groom, adjusting his cufflinks, glanced between me and the wedding planner with mild confusion. The planner hesitated, clearly panicking. I'm just sorting something out with the venue owner." The bride beamed. "Oh, you must be the owner. Thank you so much for letting us use your beautiful barn." My jaw tightened. I wasn't about to ruin their day without proof, but they deserved to know the truth. "I don't think you understand," I said carefully. "I never agreed to host this wedding." The bride laughed uncertainly. "Oh, that can't be right." Karen said. "Karen lied," I interrupted. "I was never asked about this. I was never paid. No one had permission to set foot on my land." The words hit them like a ton of bricks. The bride's smile faded, her face draining of color. The groom's jaw clenched. "What do you mean you were never paid?" he asked. I folded my arms. "I mean that unless you wrote me a check personally, your venue was stolen." The bride started to shake. "We paid Karen 10 grand for this venue." 10 grand. That was the moment I knew Karen had messed up beyond repair. But before I could respond, the woman herself appeared, floating into the scene with her usual smugness. "What's with all the commotion?" she chirped, giving the bride a warm smile before turning her icy gaze on me. "Oh, you're here." "Of course I'm here, Karen. It's my land." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be dramatic. This is a community event. It's for a good cause." The groom turned to her sharply. "Karen, did you take our money without actually securing the venue?" Karen's smile twitched. "Don't be ridiculous. Everything is under control." "It really isn't," I said, stepping closer. "Karen, you forged a venue rental agreement on land you don't own. That's fraud and trespassing and a lawsuit waiting to happen." The bride, now on the verge of tears, grabbed her fiancé's arm. What are we supposed to do? Our guests are arriving. We don't have another venue. Karen scoffed, brushing imaginary dust off her blazer. Oh, stop whining. He won't do anything. He's bluffing. She turned to me with a sneer. What? Are you really going to kick out a wedding? That would make you look so bad. I tilted my head. You really think I won't? Karen smirked. You wouldn't dare. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to call the cops. Oh no. Karen wanted to challenge me. She wanted to take advantage of my kindness and assume I'd roll over. Then she was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. I turned on my heel and started walking toward the back of my property. Because if she thought I wouldn't do anything, she clearly didn't know about my goats. I walked away from the chaos unfolding in front of my barn, but I wasn't leaving the situation alone. Oh no, I had a plan, one that involved my most enthusiastic residents. But first, I needed to see just how deep Karen's lies went. Behind me, voices rose in panic. The wedding planner was flipping through her paperwork, the bride was on the verge of tears, and the groom was beginning to put the pieces together. The guests were starting to arrive, smiling and chatting, completely unaware that their perfect barn wedding was on the verge of collapse. I took a deep breath, turned back around, and marched right into the center of the gathering. Time to confront Karen directly. Karen, I called out, my voice sharp and cutting through the murmurs. She was already smoothing her dress like this was a minor inconvenience rather than actual fraud. What now? She huffed, rolling her eyes. What exactly did you tell this couple? I asked, folding my arms. She scoffed. That they had a beautiful venue at a fantastic price, of course. And they do. You're just making a scene. The groom stepped forward, his voice tight with frustration. Karen, we paid you 10 grand. You said everything was handled. Did you ever have permission to use this barn? Karen put a hand to her chest like she was offended by the accusation. Of course I did. I've been running the HOA for years. I have access to all sorts of community resources. I snorted. Karen, my farm is not part of your HOA. Her eye twitched, but she kept up the act. Oh, don't be ridiculous. You've lived next to us for so long. What's a little cooperation? Cooperation? I repeated, incredulous. You literally stole my property for an event I had no knowledge of. You didn't just borrow the space, you sold it. That's fraud, Karen. She huffed, folding her arms. Oh, please. You wouldn't even use this barn for anything important. It's perfect for a wedding. I did you a favor, honestly. The bride let out a choked sob, and the groom rubbed his face, trying to process the mess. You lied to us, he snapped. You took our money, pretended to book a venue, and just hoped he wouldn't notice? Karen waved a dismissive hand. Oh, stop being so dramatic. The wedding's already set up. He's not actually going to throw everyone out. I smiled. You're right. Karen smirked. See? I'm not going to throw everyone out, I continued. I'm just going to let my goats in. Her face fell. Wait, what? I turned toward the back of my property. You're right, Karen. I was going to call the cops, but honestly, that would take too long. Instead, I think I'll let nature handle this one. She paled. You wouldn't dare. The groom stared at me. You have goats. 17 of them, I replied casually. And they love new places to explore. Karen turned to me with wide eyes. You let those things roam free. Oh, not usually, I said. But since you were kind enough to open my barn to guests, I think they deserve to be part of the fun. The wedding planner let out a nervous laugh. He's joking, right? I smiled. Nope. Then I turned and started walking. Behind me, I heard Karen scrambling. This is ridiculous. I rented this space. No, you stole it, I corrected. And now you're about to see why that was a terrible idea. I reached the fenced-off area where my goats were kept. They perked up immediately, sensing an opportunity. The biggest one, Tank, stomped his hooves expectantly. He loved new adventures. I unlatched the gate, and the stampede began. From behind me, I heard the first shriek of horror as my goats charged toward the barn, tails wagging, tongues flicking out for any morsel they could find. They scattered instantly, some going straight for the buffet, others knocking over decorations. The bride let out a wail as one particularly aggressive goat launched itself at the wedding cake, devouring the intricate frosting details in one glorious chomp. A guest screamed as Tank made eye contact and headbutted the folding chair, sending it flying. Another goat grabbed the groom's tie, giving it an experimental tug. The DJ's speakers crackled as one of my more curious goats decided the chords looked delicious. Pandemonium. Utter, glorious pandemonium. Karen's shriek of rage could have shattered glass. Stop them. Stop them right now. I crossed my arms. Not my problem, Karen. You rented the space, remember? It's your responsibility now. She whirled on me, livid. You absolute lunatic. You're ruining a wedding. I raised an eyebrow. No, you ruined a wedding. I'm just reclaiming my barn. The groom, who had been trying to untangle his tie from a goat's mouth, finally lost it. I can't believe this, he muttered, turning to his bride. We got scammed. Karen took our money, gave us a stolen venue, and now we're goat food. The bride, still in shock, whispered, we're suing her. Karen snapped her head toward them. Excuse me. The bride's eyes were ice cold now. You lied to us. You scammed us. And now you've ruined our entire wedding. You better believe we're taking you to court. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The wedding guests had all scattered, some trying to take pictures of the chaos, others running for safety. The buffet was destroyed, the decorations were in tatters, and the police had just arrived. The moment Karen saw the flashing lights, her bravado crumbled. I smirked. Oh look, the real party guests are here. Two officers stepped out of the car, surveying the scene. One looked at the half-eaten cake. The other glanced at the goat still munching on a chair. The first officer sighed. Okay, what exactly is happening here? I leaned against the barn and gestured to the disaster. Well, officer, these folks trespassed onto my property and set up a wedding without permission. I figured I'd let my natural security system handle it. The officer rubbed his temples. So you're saying this isn't a wedding venue? Correct, I said calmly. And this entire event is illegal. The bride wasted no time. She took our money. She scammed us. She pointed directly at Karen, her face full of righteous fury. The officer turned to Karen. Ma'am, do you have a legal contract with the property owner? Karen opened her mouth, floundering. This is a misunderstanding. We had an agreement. I pulled out my property deed. Not with me, you didn't. Karen paled. The officer frowned. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Karen let out a strangled sound, caught between rage and desperation. And as she was cuffed and led toward the police car, my goat Tank took one final bite out of the wedding cake for good measure. Perfect timing. As the officers led Karen toward their patrol car, the chaos inside the barn continued. My goats, now fully unleashed, were living their best lives. The guests? Not so much. Tank, my largest and most enthusiastic goat, had just finished devouring a sizable chunk of the wedding cake and was now eyeing the buffet table like it was his personal kingdom. He stomped forward with full confidence, his hooves clattering against the barn floor. One of the catering staff tried to block him. No, that's not for you. Too late. With one determined headbutt, Tank sent an entire platter of artisanal cheese and crackers flying. The tray flipped midair, scattering food like confetti. Several guests shrieked, diving out of the way. Another goat, Pickles, had discovered a tower of champagne glasses. With an almost artistic lack of care, he reared up and knocked the entire thing over with a satisfying crash. The barn floor was instantly covered in a mix of bubbly and broken glass. The DJ, still desperately trying to protect his equipment, was now attempting to herd two smaller goats away from the speaker wires, waving his arms frantically. A new voice cut through the madness. Somebody get these beasts out of here. The mother of the bride was standing in the center of the barn, her once elegant lavender dress now splattered with frosting and what looked like goat drool. Her hat was askew, her pearls rattling with every frustrated gesture. The bride herself was standing frozen near the altar, her face unreadable. The groom was next to her, still in a battle with the goat that had stolen his tie. The guests? They had completely abandoned the idea of a peaceful ceremony. Some were recording the chaos on their phones, while others had already retreated to the parking lot, their high heels and suits no match for the farmyard invasion. Karen, now handcuffed, was still trying to argue with the police. You don't understand. I'm the HOA president. This is an important community event. One officer glanced at me. She really do this kind of thing a lot. I smirked. Oh, you have no idea. Karen whirled on me. You're a monster. You just ruined these poor kids' wedding. I arched an eyebrow. I ruined it. You mean you, the person who stole 10 grand from them. lied about having a venue, and thought I'd just go along with it. I was helping them, she shrieked. The groom finally lost it. Karen, shut up. Silence. Even the goats seemed momentarily stunned. Karen's mouth fell open in shock. The bride wiped at her eyes and turned to me. Is there any way we can still have our wedding? I looked around. The barn was in shambles. The buffet was obliterated. The decorations had been gnawed, trampled, or outright devoured. But the people who mattered, they were still here. The bride and groom, while clearly traumatized, were standing together, and I could see the wheels turning in the groom's head. The guest who remained had a look I recognized. One of those "this is a disaster, but it's kind of hilarious" expressions. And my goats? Well, they had definitely made their presence known. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Look, if you're still willing to roll with the punches, I can try to salvage something. The bride blinked. You'd let us stay? I shrugged. It's my barn. If you're willing to help clean up and accept a more rustic experience, we might be able to turn this around. The groom looked at the bride. You okay with that? She sniffled, then slowly nodded. Yeah, I think I am. The DJ, still clutching a speaker wire, shouted from the corner. If we can keep the goats off my equipment, I can still play music. A groomsman, who had previously been hiding behind an overturned table, raised a bottle of champagne. Honestly, this is already the most memorable wedding I've ever been to. A hesitant ripple of laughter spread through the remaining guests. The mother of the bride, who had been on the verge of a full breakdown, looked at her daughter. Sweetheart, are you sure? The bride smiled through her tears. Honestly, Mom, at this point, why not? That was all the confirmation I needed. I clapped my hands. All right, folks. If we're doing this, we need to clean up. First order of business. Round up my goats. A truly absurd scene followed. The wedding guests, still dressed in their formal attire, scrambled to wrangle my goats. A bridesmaid in heels chased after Pickles, who still had a mouthful of stolen wedding flowers. The best man and a couple of groomsmen teamed up to lift Tank, who was stubbornly refusing to leave the buffet area. The flower girl, who had somehow managed to befriend one of the smaller goats, was now gently leading it back to its pen like this was the best day of her life. And Karen? Well, she was still handcuffed, foaming at the mouth as she watched her stolen wedding miraculously recover without her. This isn't how it was supposed to go, she screeched. The officer shook his head. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Might want to use it. With a final dramatic wail, Karen was loaded into the patrol car. Meanwhile, inside the barn, the atmosphere had completely shifted. With the goats wrangled, the guests started rearranging the remaining tables. The DJ tested his speakers, and the best man, who had apparently decided to lean into the chaos, started passing out drinks like this was a wild party instead of a near catastrophe. The bride walked up to me, still looking a little dazed. I don't even know how to thank you. I chuckled. Well, I did let a herd of goats crash your wedding, so. She laughed, shaking her head. Honestly, that's the best thing that could have happened. I grinned. In that case, congratulations. You're officially having the first goat wedding in this barn's history. And as the sun started to set, with music playing, drinks flowing, and absolutely zero HOA Karens in sight, I had to admit, maybe this wedding turned out perfect after all. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the barn as the unexpected wedding festivities continued. The chaos of the afternoon had somehow transformed into an unforgettable, rustic celebration, one that the guests would be talking about for years. But while the bride and groom were salvaging their big day, there was still one matter left to deal with: Karen. I turned toward the police car where she sat in the back seat, seething. The officers were finishing up their paperwork, and from the look on her face, reality had finally started to settle in. She was in serious trouble. The officer nearest to me sighed as he clicked his pen shut. All right, here's the deal, he said, rubbing his temples. We've got her on trespassing and fraud. That phony venue contract alone is enough to charge her. And considering she took money from the couple under false pretenses, yeah, she's in deep. I crossed my arms. Good. She's been pulling this Queen of the HOA act for years. It's about time she faced some consequences. The bride and groom had walked up beside me, listening intently. The groom, who had been simmering with anger for hours, finally let out a slow breath. We're pressing charges, he said firmly. Karen lunged against the car door, her face pressed against the window like an unhinged cartoon villain. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked. "I was helping you." The bride gave her a look of absolute disgust. "Helping? Karen, you lied to us. You stole our money. You left us homeless on our wedding day." Karen scoffed. "Oh, please, it still turned out fine. Just let it go and enjoy your day." The groom clenched his fist. "You think we're just going to let it go? You took $10,000 from us. That was our honeymoon money." Karen. She blinked, momentarily stunned. "Wait, you don't have more money?" The bride threw up her hands. "What do you think? We saved for years for this wedding, and you stole from us like it was nothing." Karen's expression flickered just for a second with something that almost resembled regret. But then, just as quickly, her usual entitlement returned. "Well," she huffed, nose in the air, "it's not my fault you didn't have a backup plan." The bride lunged, and I barely managed to put an arm out to stop her. The officer cleared his throat. "Okay, before things really get out of hand. Karen, you're being charged with fraud, trespassing, and—" He glanced back at the wedding planner who was standing nearby with her arms crossed. "Looks like we might be adding additional charges once we look into this phony contract." Karen's face twisted in rage. "This is ridiculous. I'll have you know that I'm a respected figure in this community." The officer deadpanned. "Ma'am, we literally just arrested you in front of half the neighborhood." At that moment, a new voice joined the conversation. Well, what do we have here?" A group of HOA board members had arrived, led by none other than Karen's arch-nemesis, Linda, a no-nonsense woman who had long been waiting for an opportunity to take Karen down. Linda adjusted her glasses, looking far too pleased with the situation. "Karen," she drawled, "you do realize that HOA funds cannot be used for personal profit, right?" Karen went rigid. "What?" Linda smiled sweetly. "Oh, you didn't think we'd notice that? That very large transaction you moved from the HOA Community Fund last month? You know, the exact amount you scammed from this couple." Karen blanched. That's different. Oh, it's very different," Linda said smoothly. "Because you just embezzled from the HOA." Karen let out a strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. The officer glanced at Linda, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, is there anything legal about what you've done in the past few months?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The groom, arms still crossed, exhaled sharply. "I want every penny back," he said. "Oh, you'll be getting more than that," Linda said, still looking far too smug. "Because once the board officially removes her as HOA president, we'll be suing her too." Karen let out an actual screech. "You can't do this to me." The officer sighed and closed his notepad. "All right, I think we're done here. Let's get her out of here before she bursts a blood vessel." The wedding guests, who had been not so subtly watching from the sidelines, cheered as the police car pulled away, taking Karen and her fraudulent queen of the HOA nonsense with it. The bride turned to me, shaking her head in disbelief. "I still can't believe this happened." I gave her a lopsided grin. "Honestly, I can't. But hey, at least your wedding is now officially the most legendary event this town has ever seen." The groom chuckled, finally letting go of some of his frustration. "Yeah, and honestly, this was so much better than some stuffy, fancy venue." The DJ threw a hand in the air. "Are we partying or what?" The remaining guests roared in approval. And just like that, the music kicked back on. The bride and groom, finally able to breathe, joined their guests as the wedding miraculously continued. Linda patted my arm. "You know, I think you just did this town a huge favor." I smirked. "All in a day's work. Though I will be charging a goat security fee if anyone else tries this nonsense." She laughed. "Fair enough." And as I stood back, watching the absolute mess that had somehow turned into a wedding, I couldn't help but feel satisfied. Karen was gone, justice had been served, and most importantly, Tank got to eat an entire wedding cake. A win for everyone. The party raged on well into the night, and against all odds, the wedding was a success. The guests, once horrified by the goat invasion, had fully embraced the chaos. People danced inside the barn, sipping drinks that had miraculously survived the earlier catastrophe. The DJ, who had managed to protect most of his equipment from my goats, was blasting music like nothing had happened. Even the bride and groom, after the most disastrous start to their wedding day, were laughing and enjoying themselves. I stood off to the side, watching the scene with a smirk. If you had told me this morning that my barn would be the place to be tonight, I would have called you crazy. But somehow, this absolute mess had turned into a one-of-a-kind wedding, one no one would ever forget. Linda, the now-in-charge HOA board member, wandered up beside me. Sipping from a glass of champagne she had probably rescued from the wreckage. "You really outdid yourself," she said, nudging me with her elbow. "Who knew a goat stampede would be exactly what this town needed?" I chuckled. "You mean exactly what Karen needed?" She grinned. "Oh, absolutely." Speaking of Karen, I turned my gaze toward the now very Karen-free wedding and let out a satisfied sigh. The HOA had officially removed her as president. Turns out, embezzling HOA funds is a great way to lose both your position and your standing in the community. The moment word got out that she had stolen money not just from the bride and groom, but also from the HOA itself, she lost every ounce of power she once had. And since her legal troubles were only beginning, her reign of terror was over. In fact, she was already packing up to move out of the neighborhood. The board had voted her out of the HOA, and without her precious title, she wasn't sticking around. "Think she'll end up in jail?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Linda swirled her drink. "Doubtful, but she'll definitely be in court for a while. The HOA is suing her for the money she misused. The bride and groom are suing her for fraud, and the wedding planner might press charges too." I smirked. "That's good enough for me." Tank, still happily digesting an entire wedding cake, trotted up and nudged my leg. Linda grinned. "You know, you really should start charging people for goat security. I think you've got a solid business model." I scratched Tank behind his ears. "You know, that's not a bad idea." The bride and groom, still dressed in their slightly disheveled wedding attire, made their way over to me. The bride had finally relaxed, her face still glowing with the remnants of laughter and adrenaline. "I still don't know how to thank you," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, I know you didn't exactly plan for this to happen, but you saved our wedding in a really weird way." I chuckled. I'll admit this wasn't how I planned to spend my Saturday. But hey, I wasn't about to let Karen get away with it. The groom nodded. "And honestly, this turned out way better than I ever expected. I mean, we got scammed, then our wedding got destroyed by goats, but somehow, it was perfect." The bride grinned. "Legendary, actually." I grinned. "So, does that mean I get to put goat wedding coordinator on my resume?" The groom laughed. "Absolutely. And if you ever want to rent out this barn for real, let us know. We'll recommend you to everyone." I smirked. "I'll consider it. But next time, it's a strict no Karen policy." The bride held up her drink. "To a Karen-free future." Linda, the groom, and a few nearby guests lifted their glasses. "To a Karen-free future." The music shifted to a slower song, and the couple moved toward the makeshift dance floor, once covered in chaos, now magically transformed into something beautiful. I watched them for a moment, then turned back to my barn. It was a little worse for wear, but honestly, it had seen worse. And at the end of the day, it had survived Karen, which was more than most people could say. As the party continued, a few of the remaining guests started mingling with the goats, snapping photos and laughing as Tank once again tried to steal someone's drink. It hit me then. This wedding, for all its disasters, had turned into something special. And I had a feeling that years from now, when people talked about the greatest weddings they'd ever been to, this one would be at the top of the list. I let out a long breath, finally feeling the tension from the day leave my shoulders. The stars were out now, the air was crisp, and the sounds of laughter and music filled the night. Karen was gone, the HOA had been purged, the wedding had been saved, and best of all, Tank had finally passed out from his food coma. I clapped my hands together, feeling nothing but satisfaction. "Yep," I muttered to myself. "Best wedding ever." And with that, I turned and walked toward the barn, where one last piece of cake was waiting for me. Because honestly, after today, I had earned it.